So this is about defining, finding out how the value of this is defined. But this in general is going to be a reference to another object. That's what it should be. This is more about what object it would be. It could also be undefined, but yeah, more later. So let's look at this first global one. This is an easy guess, or almost definitely, you know. We're just logging this outside of a function. It's just global. We're setting a variable on this, and we're going to log that variable. Let's have a look what happens. Yeah. So it's the window object, the global object, and we can see that one has come out there as well. So that means in here, yeah, one has been attached to the window. Great. So let's look at something possibly more interesting. We've got this function here. Now, will this make any difference? Now that it is in a function, what is the value of this? No, it's still the window. It's still the window. So inside a function, doesn't particularly make any difference. Let's have a look at the next example. So if it doesn't make any difference if it's in a function or not, shouldn't have uncommented that bit, then maybe it's more about lexical scoping. Maybe where this is written, maybe that has some effect on this. The value of this, it's a minefield trying to talk about this and say this a lot. Right. So yeah, we've got this. Will this make any difference? We've got the function cherry cola. It's going to return this function into returned witch doctor. We are then going to execute returned witch doctor, so that'll be those. That will return synthesizer, and that's going to be stored in return synthesizer. Then we're going to execute returned synthesizer, which is this. I'm going to see what the value of this is. Excited? Who isn't, huh? Alright, make sure I've saved because I'm terrible for it. Whoa, it's window again. It's window again. So lexical scoping makes no difference on its own. In this, that's nothing. Nothing. Weird, huh? So maybe it's a call stack kind of thing, because here we were returning the functions, but we were executing them from the global scope, you know. So maybe it's something more to do with the call stack. So if we look at this one, we're going to execute X. Does it in a function here Y? Yeah, sometimes I'm a bit inspired with the function names, sometimes not. X, Y, Z, always a solid choice. Did I just say Z? Geez, Z. Man. Alright, so function Y is getting called from inside there, defined and called. Function Z, British please, and then that's getting called there. So if you think about this one, these are going to be piled up on top of each other on the call stack. So maybe that will affect the value of this. I'm not really a very good showman, so I know you probably already know it doesn't make any difference. So the whole point of that little exercise is just to show that whilst it is very much linked to execution contexts and things like that, just this on its own, it's not affected by it's just best to not think about how the call stack works, how execution contexts work, just if you're trying to understand this for the first time. So just forget about that for now. The value of this works in a very different way. We'll just have a little look now. Now we're on an example where the value of this actually isn't global for once. That'll be nice, won't it? So we've got this little object here. This is it. It's got a variable defined inside B with a random integer, and C, which is going to console log this and this dot B, hopefully. Yeah, let's have a look at the results. So this is it.c, so it's calling this method. There you go. We can see here, console logging this. This is the object, right? This is the object that we made with the function inside and the integer there, excuse me. And yeah, this is the direct logging of that variable. So let's just go back and have a look. Yeah, so this is what we're talking about, kind of owning objects, the context. So a little kind of a hack, if you will, is everything on the left side of the full stop. This is the owning object. This is the context. So we're calling C in the context of the object. This is it. So when we're calling that, this is saying, all right, what's my context? How was I called? I was called on the this is it object, and then it knows. So this is this. So this dot B is this one. Ta-da! That's nice, right? Cool. And yeah, just an aside, like I would say, so I'm really loose with saying like method and function, but I think method should be like a function defined on an object. So that's helpful for this this little talk we're having. But generally, yeah, I just say function, method, whatever. But yeah. So this is probably more relevant when it comes to methods. Let's get rid of this one. Bye bye. I'm gonna do this one. This looks a bit more complicated, doesn't it? But it's pretty similar. So we've got this is still it. B, as we had before. Now we have C, which is a function like we did before. But inside of that function, we've got another function defined, and then we're calling it inside C as well. And now we have E with another nested key here, F, and that is a function again. So knowing what we know, that this is the context object, this should call C, right? So we can guess that this is going to be this object. Now, how about, yeah, nice. How about this one? So there's this here and this dot B, but we're calling it from inside C. So what will this be? Will it be this is still it, or maybe this function itself? Let's see. So actually, do you know what? I'm just going to comment this one out to not confuse matters. So we're just going to run this one. Okay, so the first one is the first call is similar to before. You know, this is the context object, and we're logging that variable. The second one, now what do you think's happened here? Because it's the window object again, and we're trying to log the value of that variable, but it's undefined. So let's have a look. Well, basically we already discussed it, because this might be kind of lexically inside C. It might be on the top of the call stack or whatever, but it doesn't matter because there's nothing to the left hand side of it, is there? There is no full stop. The context is global. If it's not called against a context object, then it's global. So yeah, that's a little interesting to me. Yeah, that's some information, right? And this one, so what's the context here? This is still it, and then E, I would say this is the context, everything left of this first full stop. So we're going to call it in the context of E. Let's have a look. There we go. There we go, function f, because this is E, right? E that has the function f. So we're calling it in the context of this is still it.e. So yeah, I won't patronize you by going through more things. Hopefully that makes it clear. So just think what's to the left of my call. Right. Now, as always, you get a nice rule. You're like, oh, okay, yeah, that's super simple. I can just follow that one forever, but it never works, does it? There's always exceptions. Everything always works differently. Hey, this is the new call. So you know JavaScript has constructor functions, which are just normal functions, but called with new. Let's have a look at two things here. I got really lazy with the function naming. Bleh. So let's do this one. Now, this is very similar to one of the first ones we had, right? This is just a function scope. It's saying we're setting two variables on the this object, and they're going to console log this. Now, when we run this, what do you think it's going to be? It's going to be the global object, right? Because there's nothing different than that first example. There you go, it's the window. So why did I even bother? Well, you know, it's commented out there. Oh dear, didn't need to comment that all out, did I? So blur new, this is the real difference. Let's have a look at that. Alright, so this is a bit more what we wanted, isn't it? Now, why is that? Let's go back to the code. So when we're calling this blur function with new, that's what makes a function a constructor function. So it is setting the value of this to itself. So blur, yeah, because of this new call, this is then blur, which makes the rest of the code work. So yeah, that's nice, right? So that's the new kind of binding, and as you can imagine, since like constructor functions, classes, very similar, this is the same with classes. Cool. Comment these out. So something to think about, I suppose, is if doing this new, you can get the value of this kind of automatically set to an object, which seems quite useful. Can you do that yourself? So not necessarily having to have stuff on the left-hand side of a method call. Maybe you could it'd be nice if you could set this to whatever you want, right? Well, I wouldn't mention it if you couldn't, would I? So here we go. Let's have a look at this. So this is called Explicit Binding. Yeah. Oh, my scrolling's gone wild. Okay, so we've got a variable called lightning toots that holds an object. There is a variable a which has the value brup, and there's a vt, which is a function, and it's going to log this dot a. Next, there is a function squeak that takes a callback function and executes it. All right. So then we do lightning toots dot vt. Okay. So now you already know, right? The left-hand side, that determines the context. So we can tell without even running this, we're already that good, that a is going to equal brup. But the interesting thing is what we're going to do here, squeak. So lightning toots dot vt, we're passing that in as a callback, and then this function is going to execute it. You probably already know that as well. So let's have a look. Brup, and undefined. Why? Same as last time, or same as the other time. You might be like, there is a left context object here. That's great. But we're not executing this function here, are we? We're passing it here. We're passing it into there, and then it's getting called inside this function. So when it actually gets called, what's the context? Nothing. There's no object here, so that's global. Ooh. How can we solve the problem that the callback function is losing this value? Well, luckily we can explicitly bind it, as the comment says. Cool. So this function here, everything that's going on here is very similar to the last time. The only difference being we've got this call method function being kind of added to a callback function. So what's happening is when you use call, you get to pass this value of your choice. So it's kind of interesting because I know I said not to think in terms of execution context, but that's just for kind of when you're trying to determine the value of this. But with things like call, apply, and bind, you get to choose what the this value is, and so you are instructing the execution context as to what the value of this is, which is cool. So it's all you're in control. Nice. Yeah, so for this one, we're passing the function same as we did, but we're using this call method on a callback function, and we're saying, all right, when you call this a callback function, and call will actually call it as well, then please use this as the value of this. And you can also pass some parameters in here to the function as well if you need to. If you're using apply, it's exactly the same as call, aside from this arguments bit here, it would be an array. So you can think like apply array if you're like me and need help remembering simple differences. Okay, so let's just have a look at the browser to see where is it? Yeah, so we can see that's been logged out there. So we did decide the value of this. Very nice. Cool. So the only thing about that is we've got this in the callback function. We're saying, hey, this time I'm going to call this function and this is going to be the value of this. But I mean, when you're doing that, you probably want the value of this to be the same all the time. You might do, and bind gives you that option. So we already said about explicit binding, and that's when you tell JavaScript Engine exactly what the context is going to be. It's not implicit. It's not just like, oh, okay, this is what was on the left side of the full stop, just the context object. This is saying, all right, it's definitely going to be this value. Let's use this. And binding, the bind function here, this is what you call hard binding. So not only are you saying this is going to be the value of this time the function is called, with bind you're saying every time we call this function we're going to store, so we bind this here, we store it in a variable, so every time we use that variable the value of this is always going to be the same. You can't override it, you can't call it in a different way, apply it. That is a bound function of this. So let's just check that works. It does. Nice. Cool, so that's some of the examples. Maybe I've got some more. Let's have a look. Okay, I have got some more examples actually. As you may have noticed, it's now dark. I haven't got one of those cool ring lights or anything. Maybe I'll treat myself if I finish this series, but yeah, no, I went away for a while. I made some examples because I forgot to talk about arrow functions, because they have a special this binding, and actually I mean, it's supposed to simplify things. I've done a few examples on it because I personally found it a little bit confusing. the explanation is like it's a lexical this. So wherever the function is typed, it gets that this, or that it doesn't have a this value, and all of those explanations. I mean, I can't really think of a better way to put it, but I find them confusing because this value is defined as functions are called. Then that sort of doesn't make sense, right? Because it's saying like, oh, it's the parent, so it's like, but it's how it's being called. So what's it got to do with the parent? Or anyway, yeah, for me it's a little, it was a little unclear. So I'm gonna go through a few examples. You're probably smarter than me, so you'll be fine. But nice to cover it, right? So we got a class. It's got a constructor. It's setting something, a little variable on the this, and at this point we're calling new down here. So as we said earlier, same with the constructor functions. With the new calling, this is going to be the class. So we know that this should be solid this. So we've got a normal function here, a greet function, kind of old school style function, and then we've got an arrow function here, and they're both going to log this, and we'll see if we can find a little something out about arrow functions from this. Okay, so I should uncomment this as well. What we're going to do is, since we know the value of this here, we're going to pass this. So first we're just going to call the function, great function. Maybe we should call the great arrow function as well, right? Geez, spent all this, supposedly all this time on the examples, but still not good enough. Yeah, and let's just have a quick look at those first. I'm here twice, so same value, great. Just what you'd expect. Now, when we get to the callback function zone, called dubious callback, first we will pass in the great function. So what's this going to be? You probably know because okay, well, I say you probably know because we did a similar example earlier, and it would be the global this, but because it's a class, so you know, the same kind of thing with use strict, and with classes that's kind of applied automatically, so we get undefined. So this is undefined. So now we're gonna do the solution that we did earlier. We're not storing it in a variable, but we're gonna bind the function call to the original object, or class object this time, and pass it in. And as you would expect, it does work. There you go. All right. But why bother? Why bother with all that boring binding when you can use an arrow function? So we're calling we're passing the arrow function here, and that's working. Just make sure that's the right one. Yeah, that's working. But why does it work? This is the question. Why does the arrow function work? So I finally got it through my thick skull as to how it works. So we're passing through this, here we go, great arrow function, and we're passing this to the callback. It's getting called without a context, so it's kind of global, and obviously if that was great function, as we learned earlier, there's no context, there's no full stop, so there's nothing left of the full stop, and it's not been bound or anything like that. So it's just going to say this is global, undefined, whatever. But for an arrow function, and this is the bit that tripped me up, it's not like a combination of the original rules, like, oh, okay, it's like the context and something to do with the binding and something like that. It's just throw all of that out the window, and literally wherever the arrow function is typed, the kind of surrounding scope is the parent. So you look at this, like it's called in the callback, goes to the great arrow function, and it looks to its kind of lexical scoping, its scope parent. I know I said to forget about scope, but that was just for learning the normal this, arrow functions, different beast. So it looks for this, it says, what's my lexical parent? Which is solid this. That's the thing that makes scope above it. So this is solid this. Yeah. So that was yeah, at least for me, that was where I was tripped up, is sort of trying to combine the existing rules and this kind of arrow functions not having a this or lexical this thing. I got a bit tripped up, but yeah, it's actually quite simple if you don't overthink it. Now, after saying it's quite simple, I'm obviously gonna move on to some complicated examples, but the next one's not complicated. None of them are complicated, it's all fine. But it seems like even uncommenting examples is complicated for me, so don't trust my word. Right, so this one is nothing much. All I wanted to do is, I feel like I keep saying like, oh, classes, constructor function, you know, it'll all be roughly the same. So I just felt like I should probably do an example of both, just to show you that that really is true. So this is exactly the same as we had before, except for solid this time isn't a class, it's just a normal function. We're calling it with new, which makes it a constructor function. And we're doing the same kind of things. We're defining a couple methods on it, one old school, one arrow. We're putting a variable on it. And do you know what? I'm just gonna, I'll uncomment them all. So as before, we've got passing in the normal function to the callback. We've got passing in the bound function to the callback, and we've got passing in the arrow function to the callback. Now let's see what we get. Yes, 3 big successes and undefined. What's this one? Oh yeah, of course, that's the from this dubious callback. But we seem like we've got too many results, right? Ah, no, okay, yeah. I apologize for wasting your time. Yes, that's fine. It's just this one works, this one's undefined, this one works, this one works. All right. I should probably just re-record this, but I've done quite a few takes on this stuff, because the this value, it's not so easy. Okay. Now, when I say it's not so easy, you're probably thinking it's pretty easy, you know. But yeah, as we've been going through, hopefully it is clearing up, like, because there are set rules that we'll review, but we've been through them bit by bit. I suppose 5 if you include the arrow functions. But yeah, it's still, I don't know. I can find it a little confusing. And this is one of these things. So when I was looking at like an arrow function example, to be honest, I totally forgot about this this rule, this part, and that is to not use arrow functions as methods. So don't use them like I said earlier, like a method, basically just a function on an object. So we've got this example from earlier on, which I was going to use to show about arrow functions and callbacks, but it turns out with as a method on a object doesn't work. Now let's have a look. So as I said, similar to before, and we've got this function, and inside that we've got a kind of a surrounding function here that inside is logging this. We've got one called unbound. We've got one called bound, which is an arrow function. That's because arrow functions are sometimes called bound functions, just because they're sort of bound to their parents this value, or I should probably say that it's the same as doing like bind this in the constructor. Yep. Okay, so let's have a look at the results of this one. 3 windows, 3 global calls. Don't know if that's a surprise. It was for me because I forgot. But yeah, basically it's easy, right? To say, okay, arrow function looks at the parent. But the thing that is, I mean, now that I'm saying it out loud, it seems really obvious. But it looks at the lexical scope of the parent. So if you think of the scope chain, blah, 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 what makes a scope? Does an object make a scope? No, it doesn't. So when we're using functions or a class, it looks up, okay, this is going to be the class name, or it'll be the function. But in an object, it looks up, it sees no new scope up here. Jeez, what we're doing. And I've made a real mess of this, sorry. Yeah, but anyway, yeah, it goes up and there is no scope above it, so it just ends up at the window. So that's why don't use them with objects. Just leave it alone. All right, we made it. We made it. Yeah, so we got to the end of the little talk, and we can do a victory lap with this summary slide. So these are kind of in order of precedence. So you know, the ones above take from the bottom ones. Although that said, arrow function, I should have moved that into a little section on its own. That's a special one. As you can see, I just remembered it. Just like, okay, also that one. But the other 4, it's in order of precedence. So new, if a function is called with new, you know this is going to be the newly constructed object. Explicit binding, if you've kind of said in code, you've told the execution context, this is what the value of this is going to be. You know, this is the object that it's going to point to. You can, with call, apply, bind, that sort of thing. Implicit binding, if there's no explicit binding, then it would be the context. So anything the left side of the full stop, okay, that's my context. That's gonna be the value of this, basically. Default, none of the above apply, so it's global, it's undefined in whatever mode. And arrow functions, the little different beast, just wherever the arrow function was typed, its parent is going to be this. Its lexical parent is going to be the value of this. Seems so simple now. Cool. So yeah, thank you for listening to this one. Or seeing me struggle through this one. I honestly thought, I was like, oh, man, yeah, I can talk about this easy. Turns out I had a little struggle, especially with the arrow functions for some reason. Maybe because I'm old school. But anyway, yeah, I seriously just want to say thank you to because I know a few people have actually watched. I'm not even sure why I'm doing these videos, but yeah, it's really nice that some people have watched them. A little bit embarrassing as well, but they should maybe just be ignored. But no, thank you very much. And anyway, to anyone watching, thank you again, and see you next time. Bye bye.